will proceed. Do we have any action item list updates?
So this afternoon, Andy sent over, and I didn't realize till just a minute earlier that I think that just came to me, the select board feedback. So I'll incorporate that into the action items list. And I've also been trying to go through, I'm not complete yet for everything that's come through for draft revisions, but going through and making sure that the draft revisions address all of the action item comments. And if not, I'm adding those to my feedback, so I can raise those if other folks don't, as we work through our review of the articles.
Okay.
But that's about it for updates in that list.
Right. So after this meeting, you'll be circulating an updated action item list.
Yeah, after this meeting, after being able to incorporate what Andy sent over. But
sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
I sent around the CIPC changes, which were approved less than an hour ago from our meeting the previous week. So those are out there. I had sent feedback to for the animal control officer through William, and William answered the question today. So I was able to incorporate that and submit a draft for the dogs running at large article. So that's been distributed as well. So we can look at that for next time.
Cool. Alrighty then. Next item on the agenda was plan for outreach to stakeholders to review and discuss proposed bylaw revisions. So once we have a bylaw article ready for more public review and comment, this is sort of to remind me that we want to, and all of us, I guess, to circulate these proposed revisions that we've come up with so far to the various stakeholders. For example, the CPC specifically has to be included in whatever we choose to propose as an update here, but that applies to all. So every bylaw article, once we've got an update, if there are specific stakeholders that need to review it, we will forward it to them and ask for their review and comment.
I think the other thing this was about was we had some questions about feedback that committee members had that needs to go to other stakeholders that we didn't specifically request feedback from.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good point. And some of us have been reaching out to get questions answered. Like you just said, Greg, you had reached out to the dog officer on the illicit discharge bylaw. I had a couple of questions that I've reached out to the Board of Health and DPW and got answers to those. And I think and as you know, we're kind of waiting on feedback from the Accessibility Advisory Commission. I've had a little bit of discussion with them. Later tonight, we'll take care of it. We'll sort of get the next round of discussion done with the Affordable Housing Trust. But basically at this point now, if we have, if you're somewhat close to being done and you have a question or two that, sort of directly reach out to the people who can answer that question. I'd say it's just, each one of us is probably, it would probably be appropriate for us to reach out to the appropriate boards or individuals to help get our questions answered. So I'll kind of take that as authorization from the committee to reach out as needed and encouragement to reach out as needed. So we're at a point where we really need to produce. We need to be producing results. And so my intent, and I think everybody's intent is or should be to reach out and get answers to any questions that might come up as we're looking at the revisions. It's sort of the next step beyond the suggestions that we solicited initially, but like in a couple of cases beyond the initial suggestions. Once I started looking in more detail at that particular bylaw section, I realized that there were some additional questions that needed to be answered. So, yeah, let's proceed to get answers as, you know, as fast as we need them.
For the first part of what we were discussing, would it just administratively in terms of the outreach to the stakeholders for bylaw revisions that we think are ready to start getting posted? Should whichever of us own a particular bylaw take the initiative to send that draft out once it's ready for publication to the stakeholders that were originally identified for each of the articles, or is there another plan?
Not quite sure about that, but it sort of ties in with the next agenda item. So let me kind of segue into that. We talked about this a bit at the previous meeting, that once we have bylaw articles that we're comfortable with, the idea was to publish them on the website. And you know, I had circulated a sort of a sketch of how basically a table, you know, and that I think, you know, from this committee's page on the website, a link from there to the table of proposed revisions here, and that will have clickable links so people can click on the link. And if we're kind of comfortable with that as an approach, once we've identified some articles that are suitable for publication, I'll get the ball rolling with William to get that all, you know, that the website is set up to handle that. And when we have something that's ready to be, you know, ready for a review, we can put it up there and we can notify the relevant stakeholders requesting their, you know, but instead of, yeah, we don't really need to send them the document, because now we'll have a place where they can go see it. But yeah, in terms of who, I mean, you know, I had done that, you know, the initial email to all the stakeholders, and we did one follow-up, and thinking maybe sort of that same path, you know, when we as a committee have agreed on a certain, you know, set of articles that are ready to be published, we'll just sort of, I'll resurrect that that mailing list that I used before, and we'll just sort of, probably the easiest path to take is just to, to do it that way. So at the conclusion of this meeting, we will have identified maybe a set of, you know, a set of bylaw articles that are ready to review, and I can work through William to get the stakeholders, the appropriate stakeholders notified, and then their, you know, feedback requested, something like that. But yeah, I think in between these, we're not going to be putting out new stuff, because it's going to be this committee's agreement that, yeah, this is ready for the world to see. Although technically all of our drafts that we've discussed during our meetings are public records of a sort. But yeah, this is really, you know, this is really the time to start kicking off, getting the work out there. And presumably we'll be getting some feedback from the stakeholders, from the general public, but and we will be, you know, we'll update those proposed revision articles as needed. But seems to be the way, you know, sort of that seems to be the way we were headed, and it's really, you know, it's time that we start producing those results. We still have a fair amount of work ahead of us, but the more that we can put out there, the more chance we'll get for some feedback and be able to say, this is good. So in the time remaining to us tonight, for the most part, we had at the previous meeting talked about starting to go through the list of bylaw articles that we think might be ready to publish. So I don't know what the best way is to go through that. Off the top of my head,
I think we kind of just go the ones that have been circulated, and we can go through them in order and pull them up. That
yeah, let me see
just have
here.
whoever do a quick presentation.
Yep. Yeah, so let's right. Yeah. So go through them in numeric order, starting with Article 2.
that was my article. I broke it down as far as I have 7 different bullets on the various kinds of changes that were in there at the request of the town moderator. I've removed places where we assumed that the moderator was a male, adjusted to remove single gender language, and in general, just tried to reword things a little bit so that you don't necessarily have to have particular pronouns in there. As we've discussed, we adjusted the posting languages. So any place where they said things like and attested copy thereof in some conspicuous place, each of the precincts in town, or there are various other different ways of posting depending on what it is in the article. I've replaced it with posting them in compliance with town posting requirements. And we can put a reference to section, to Article 1 and the section once we have that if needed. So we talked about putting that in there.
Yes, a couple of points that came into my mind. One is it's sort of vague to say in compliance with town posting requirements, but and there's in this and in Article 3, there's a couple of cases that are significantly different from most cases which are publication in a local newspaper.
Yep.
And we kind of talked at our previous meeting about using that language, publication in a local newspaper, doing as we do in the charter. We're defining in Article 1 that a local newspaper means a local paper and the town website. What's unique about this and Article 3 is that there are a couple of cases that currently, like for posting of warrants, for posting of the Finance Committee report, that's Article 3, and for posting notice of adjourned town meetings. That's where it talks about conspicuous places in every precinct, or in Article 3, it talks about the library and the branches and the police station. So those kind of all go together. And what this may mean is that in Article 1, we sort of define 2 things. One is the typical notices that, in the newspaper and on the website, whatever terminology we ultimately decide to use for that. And for now, I think we could be a little bit flexible. Yeah. And then the other is these, I don't know what the right word for it is going to be, but the things that we currently say we want posted in every precinct. That posting in every precinct is our invention. That's not a matter of state law. So we're free to decide what's most appropriate for that. And if we do something like what you've got here, Greg, and we might want to revisit the wording at some point. Yes. But for now, I think this is satisfactory that we can define in Article 1 the posting requirements that apply to town meeting things like warrants and reports. Yeah, and that was intended to be kind of direct us to that other article. As I mentioned earlier, Section 3 posts in a conspicuous place, and Section 4 is a public place. So we weren't even consistent within the article itself. So yeah. But yeah, given that the idea, then that sort of goes back to what we will, what we want to do ultimately in Article 1 was to sort of have some language that covers, the various forms of posting. And there's, like I said, there's basically just 2. There's the posting of town meeting items that is different from just publication in a newspaper, and then there's notices of public hearings and other comparable things which commonly are understood to be the newspaper and the website. So yeah, for now, are we good with Article 2 here?
So I just had a couple points. One, I think the current title is town meetings, plural. So I think we need to tweak that.
Okay.
And then for the header into sections 1 and 1A, minor point, consider reordering the two based on the order that they're discussed in the section to something maybe along the lines of dates of annual town election and town meetings. And then section 1A seemed a little odd, the way it starts out. The spring session of the annual town meeting shall be held on the second Monday in May of each year and the third Monday in October. So
Yeah,
both
that
of those
is-
aren't the spring session.
Kind of weird.
So I thought maybe we could strike everything up to and including annual and just start it off with town meetings, plural.
It does need to say annual because there are procedural differences between annual town meeting and special town meeting.
Yeah.
So we should look into the revision history of this section and see what's going on there. And actually, this draft that I circulated is based on 2021 revisions. This article was revised in 2022 to change the time to 7 o'clock. So we will need to update this for 2022 revisions. I will add a comment to that.
Yeah, I think just as far as the annual town meeting, I thought we might be able to get away with it because the charter defines that the May and October town meetings as both effectively annual town meetings. But yeah, if we need to leave the reference to annual in, then I don't know, strong purpose there.
Okay, so I'm taking a note there and we'll look into that. So the fourth bullet from the list is just add a missing motion to the order of motions that was requested by the moderator. Clarify restriction on reconsideration of motions. Skip requested that we clarify that restriction is specifically talking about motions from earlier in the same meeting. There are other things that say we can't bring anything that's outside of the motion, so that may or may not be necessary. Probably the biggest changes are section 5, where I reworked it aligned with our current practice, where we allow anyone to observe town meeting, and we may require visitors to sit in a particular area for voting purposes, which really only matters when we are not using the electronic devices. Added the section about non-voters may address the meeting at the discretion of the moderator, which is something comes out of town meeting time. And the last part is determination of vote. And I did some research on Mass General Law and town meeting time. And as far as I can tell, there are no issues with stating that in section 16, written or printed ballot, that the electronic handset voting is sufficient as it provides an accurate count and it is secret. So I believe we are okay to allow that. Basically, it has to be something in our allowed by our bylaws, but there's nothing that says our bylaws can't allow that. And then I merged section 18A into 15 because it's determination of the vote, and it really doesn't make any sense to have that separately.
Yep, that makes perfect sense to me.
So the only question I have is whether we actually want to mark section 18A as leave it there with a marker that just says repealed, which I've done in a couple other ones, but I didn't do it until after I'd done this one.
Yeah, I think here just deleting it is reasonable.
Okay, because there's nothing after it, so.
Right. So,
Oh, and did I put in clarify? I did not. Where special committees are defined, and that was feedback from Skip. So there are a couple places where it refers to special committees. So I added a reference to section 2-3 of the town charter.
Yep. Okay, anything else? So you will make those changes, and how do we want to work this now? We want to make those changes and then at our next meeting, review that and say, yeah, it's good for publication.
Yeah, because it's more than just editorial in section 1A. I do want to come back and review that one.
Mhm. Okay, sounds like a plan.
In, it's as minor can get, but in section 13, the last full line, I think we have an extra comma between of and any.
So actually, yeah, there should be either be a comma between on and or no comma at all.
Yeah. I think it reads, to my eyes, it reads better with a comma after on, action on, comma,
Okay.
or consideration of, comma, any article.
Okay. And just so as a note, when I'm adding punctuation like that, I'm actually highlighting the space next to it just so it's a little bit bigger. Otherwise, I'm generally
Yes,
stopping at the end of the.
yes, I agree with that. Yeah, if you're going to add or remove punctuation, you want the highlight, you want people to be able to see it.
Yeah.
And highlighting just a single comma is difficult to read.
And the only other thought in section 3, well, back to the discussion of town posting and publishing in a newspaper. We might, since we're defining publishing in a local newspaper, I wondered if you'd want to leave the second section that's stricken with a reference to the local newspaper and only change the language to the town posting requirements in the first instance.
Yeah, I think that's section 3 and section 4. The wording is going to need to wait. The final wording is going to need to wait until we have
Yeah.
Section 1.
Article 1.
Yeah, I think, for now, we know what we're trying to get at here, and
Yep.
we haven't quite figured out the best wording, but that's okay. We know what we plan to do, and we will at some point work out the exact wording the way we want it. All right. Anything else? So looks like the next one that is potentially ready for review, I'll skip over 6, 7, and 8 from Skip since he's not here to discuss them, and they're not really formatted, or Skip had some questions embedded in there that need answers before we really can nail those down. So the next one that is potentially ready for publication is Article 11, Inspector of Wires. And I have just one item in there. In section 1, there's a reference to the Acts of 1932, Chapter 282, Section 26. That is, whatever that was intended to be, that reference is not correct. The Acts of 1932, Chapter 282, has only 4 sections. And it applies to the prison, some prison thing. So I don't know what that was supposed to be, but given that the Chapter 166, Section 32 seems to be sufficient for the purposes of this article, I would say we can just delete that reference to the Acts of 1932. It's an artifact from somewhere. But I'm not going to go through searching multiple years of old acts. I did kind of a quick search in all of the acts of 1932 to see if there's anything that related to an inspector of wires. And there were three, for three specific towns that did not include Grafton. So I don't think it's worthwhile trying to figure out what that reference was meant to be. Any other observations on this one?
Was there did we send out one on that one? I just couldn't find it.
Yeah, this was part of the original group, and I'd include Article 11 in the master grouping
Okay.
earlier this week. I can actually.
Oh, there it
Yes.
is.
Yeah, this was Brian. This was in Brian's mailing from earlier this week.
And then the only other item kind of called out is open here is discussion of penalties. So
Yeah,
from the town administrator and that.
right. I think we still have work we want to do on penalties, and so yeah, we can sort of we can assume that we will be revisiting the question of the penalties here.
Okay.
So with the addition of that extra stricken section in area section 1, doesn't sound like we have anything else if we wanted to post this one.
Yeah, I'd say with that one change, we can consider this one ready for publication. And what's next? Oh, the next one is Article 14. A very similar article as it happens. And because I went through and was looking up all these Mass General Laws references, I discovered that Chapter 143, Section 30 is actually Chapter 143, Section 3O.
Which article was this again?
It's Article 14,
Okay.
gas piping and gas appliances. Yeah, at first I thought that Chapter 30 was just utterly wrong, but
So that's a typographical issue.
yes, that a 0 looks an awful lot like an O.
Yep.
I might question the wisdom of the legislature in designating a section 3O when that could be so easily confused with 30. But
I don't know if you have it offhand, but is it an O in parentheses?
No.
Or just
it's 3O, just like 3A, 3B, 3C. And they got down to 3M, 3N, and the next one was 3O. And I think there was a 3Ps and maybe some more after that. But yeah, I went looking for section 30 and I either didn't find it or it was totally irrelevant to this. And
So just on the previous one, there actually is a chapter 282 of Mass General Law, but it is not published on the website. It just says chapter omitted. So I was wondering if there was supposed to be an MGL reference in there. So.
yeah, unlikely. I think I went looking for that, thinking that same thing. And
It's definitely been typed as 30, not 30
yes,
in this form.
yes, it was typed as 30. Someone presumably typed it in, reading it on paper, and
Yep.
3O looks an awful lot like 30. And when you're talking sections, chapter numbers and section numbers, you tend to think of numbers before you think of numbers with a letter suffix. But other than that, I thought the proposed changes here look good. So let's see, the next one, we're all good with that?
Yeah.
All right, the next one in numeric sequence is Article 17, the Council on Aging, for which no changes have been proposed. And as I recall, we kind of decided that for all of the bylaw articles where no changes are proposed, we'll do something like this. I think this is the only one like that we've done so far, but we'll do all of them just like that.
Yeah, so just to make the point explicit on 14 with the correction of the 30 to 3-0, I would assume that that one's ready to post as well.
Yep. All right, next we have Article 21.
So this is primarily, there's a capitalization typo, couple word transposes, they typed form instead of from in two places in the same sentence. There is a transitional provision about when the commission is first established that is no longer needed. And there is one section on posting requirements. So I used the same language as we did in Article 2, saying in compliance with town posting requirements.
And the same caveat applies that the specific wording is subject to change once we decide exactly how we want that done.
Yep.
One item, just remembering off the top of my head while this is opening. This section, and I think in total there's 8, or this article, and I believe there's 8 altogether, as a section on severability, which seems fairly straightforward and seems like something that really might apply or we might want to apply throughout the bylaws. So I just had the high level kind of thought. I wanted to ask the question if we thought that it might make sense to include some language with respect to severability in section 1 or somewhere along those lines, so that it applied throughout the bylaws as opposed to only including, fairly similar severability language in the 8 bylaws that currently have a section on it.
Interesting whether there's mass general law that covers that.
I suspect there might be, that it might need to be specific to certain sections, but that's worth getting town council's opinion on.
There's 3 areas, one each in section 3, 4, and 5, where the current language says "and historic," and I believe double checked it, and "a historic" would be appropriate.
No, I think it's, and is the, because H is kind of soft, so it generally.
Historically, from what I remember and what I've been taught about the English language, and historic is technically the correct way to do it. It is commonly pronounced ahistoric, but
Historic is probably on the cusp of whether or not you're actually pronouncing, or
Yeah.
the H is enough to.
historically, and historic is the correct way to say it, to write it.
As long as we were consistent.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
I think the only other item I have in section 5, at the top of the second page, the end of the second row, there's a "his." I think we can change that to
Oh,
"their."
yes, thank you.
That was all. I had. Dave, on the severability question, is that something you want me to ping Evan, ask if you want to share that with council?
Yeah, I just made a note to myself to do that. That it for Article 21?
So I'm just replacing his with the, except that the term shall be for 3 years. And I did verify that we do use an historic in it, in all the cases.
Mhm.
So we are at least consistent.
Yep. So that's 21. And with the changes with what little we've discussed here, we're good to publish that. All right, so in terms of actually getting those published, once you guys get your updates done, if you can send me the either the Word document or a PDF, whatever is easiest for you. And if I get a Word, I'll convert it to a PDF and I'll collect those together and get them and send that off to William to get started with our webpage.
Mine are in docs, so I'll send PDFs.
Do you want a draft watermark on these or anything like that?
Yes,
They have them, yeah.
yes, I think a draft watermark would be quite
I should have
appropriate.
that to 22. There. Oh,
Okay,
actually, I think the way it's worded is. So it's at 22 and 29. They put the rationale up front for the 3 pages of that, and then 2 pages of the actual articles. I wasn't sure which order would be the best for that. We want to just list the replacement article up front, and then they have people that want to see how we got to that with the other section later.
off the top of my head, I'm not sure what format I'd want. I mean, what we have here is your document, Greg, which starts with comparing the two, and then provides a whole new Article 22, and yeah. Anybody have a problem with publishing that as our draft for this one? It's a different format from most of the ones, but considering what we're proposing to do here, it's probably acceptable. And in the table that we publish on the website, Article 22 and 29 will both link to this document.
Yeah.
We're good with this one, or anything else? I mean, this, I think.
Maybe. This is picky, but from like a formatting standpoint, we highlight where you wrote combined and then the section number and put the green on there just because it indicates the change in all the other articles.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why I was thinking, was it make sense to put the new article up front as you're reading it? So here's the combined article, and then for an analysis, you can scroll further. So then basically the entire first section would be green otherwise. So I don't.
Yeah, that's why instead of highlighting everything green, just literally what's bolded right now where it says combined section 1, or like your hybrid, your new hybrid section 1 and then combined section 2. It would give each one of those a little bit more pop and maybe make it a little bit more intuitive for anyone reading.
Yes, so I think I like the idea, Greg, of starting out the document with the new combined article.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that box, the box on top of it, where it just says, yeah, right. There's no point in highlighting everything. You just start at the top. You're saying we're combining articles 22 and 29, and this is the result. After that.
Okay, I'll give that a shot. See what that means.
After that, the article. Yeah. Right. So Article 29 is just repeals the Article 22. And then after that, you can do the
Yep.
You know, the analysis. Yeah, I'm good with that, I think.
Okay.
If we had a box of any of those comments, would we want to add anything about how consideration of penalties is still open or?
I suppose anywhere where there's penalties, we could put a bullet item in the highlights box to say that penalties are still under study.
Maybe just have that as a title on the page. So the following areas are still under review and posting requirements and penalties.
Mm-hmm.
And that way we don't have to put it in the individual documents for now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. All right, where were we? All right. So 22 and 29, Greg's going to revise the document and
Yep.
we'll come back and finalize that. Let's see, the next one, 23.
So on the sewers, this was one of the ones initially that we didn't have any comments on. But as I went to put it in this format, I realized that the two sections were only labeled as 1 and 2. So I modified that to section 1, section 2. No other changes.
Yep.
I did confirm the MGL references though.
Let me just make a note to myself. I've got, not here, I've got the, on one of my browser tabs on my other computer at home, I've got the, the state library of all the acts of earlier years. Let me make a note to myself just to double check that. All right, so 23. I'll confirm that the acts of 1946 reference is correct. But assuming it is, this is ready for publication. All righty, and let's see. We're approaching 7:30, but we're not quite there yet. Article 25 was the wetlands bylaw. And what I've got here are the changes relative to what Article 25 should read, not to what's actually there. I need to follow up with Candy and make sure that we get the, get the other corrections put in. But here, let's see. So all I've done here was I went, and instead of a newspaper of general circulation in the municipality, I simply used the term local newspaper, and with the expectation that that would ultimately get defined in Article 1. And that's one of those things that's subject to further revision when we nail down the terminology. And the only other thing that had to be done here was I spelled out a little bit more detail the public notice and public hearing for the purpose of regulations. think that showed up in a couple, 3 different places and the phraseology they use is just public notice and public hearing, but I thought it was worth being slightly more detailed. Notice published in local newspaper at least 7 days prior to the hearing. I think I've done that in a couple of other places too, but other than that, the Conservation Commission has generally been keeping this bylaw up to date, or trying to, modulo the clerical errors that seem to have crept in. Any other thoughts on this?
Looks good.
All right. Let's see, Article 27. Article 27, we had, that was the biomedical research, and there again, I had a clarification of public notice regarding adopting regulations, just like we did for the wetlands bylaw. And I put a note at the top regarding the potential for penalties being changed. I think when we publish this to the website, I won't put yellow highlighting in the penalties part. But other than that, anything else? (28A) is fairly straightforward.
So the chief asked us to clarify the title of the article to add mandatory retirement. When we had feedback from Evan and from chief about the form of the update, and after consulting with the 2 of those, it ended up with the statement that's there, and actually reference the Mass General Law. So the feedback from Evan actually provided a reference to the acts which created the section, but I figured better just to have the reference directly to the section. The one thing I haven't been sure of, and we probably haven't been consistent with, is how we reference general law. Some places it's MGL, some places it's GL, some places it's Mass General Law, some places it has dots, some places it doesn't. I don't know if we want to do a final pass through at some point to have a standard form of referencing Mass General Law.
Yes, that thought has occurred to me, that it's overall ideally we should be consistent.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not even consistent in my edits, because I don't look back from time to time. That might be one of those things to do as a general purpose thing afterward.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about that right now, but yeah, sort of a final pass through this. If we want to try to make our general law references consistent in their format. All right, so that's 28A.
Yep. So Article 2, I pulled up the current bylaws to see if anything significant had changed in Section 2, Article 2, Section 1A. And the only thing that really changed was the time. So what I have on my local copy is: the spring session of the annual town meeting shall be held on the 2nd Monday in May of each year, and the fall session of the annual town meeting shall be held on the 3rd Monday in October. Both sessions begin at 7 p.m.
Sounds good.
So I just added fall session of the annual town meeting shall be held on the, which is basically the same wording as the first part of the sentence. Okay, I'll send that update out.
So we're good with 28A. And 29, we've covered that. Article 31.
Fairly minor edits. The fire chief had requested that we increase all applicable penalties by 100%. So that's reflected here with a comment that penalties writ large are still largely under consideration. And then Skip had a point to specify fire chief or designee in addition to town police officers as the enforcing authorities for the non-criminal disposition discussed. So it's really it for updates.
So I'm good with that.
Yep.
Let's see. Okay. So Article 31 is good to go. Article 32, there wasn't much there. Like the only thing I saw in Article 32 was the first paragraph of Section 3 says exactly, essentially the same thing. There might have been a minor wording difference as the charter says, so there's no need to repeat it in the bylaws. It's one of the things we sort of discussed early on, was trying to avoid repeating in the bylaws something that the charter says. That's the only change I could see. Other than that, this is sort of adds a little bit to what the charter says about how the town administrator is appointed. Anything else on that?
Just want to look at the one in the. Library trustees. Yeah, I don't see anything significant, any difference, so I'm good.
Okay. Let's see if we have time for one more. Article 34. What's Article 34?
CPC.
Yeah,
Very,
what did we
very
do with
small.
CPC? Yeah, which
The usual.
changing chapter to section for consistency, eliminated transitional provisions. Be more explicit about the terms expiring. And again, the posting notices.
The only two thoughts I had on this one, the same comment on severability, so we'll handle that separately. And then just before that, section 4 on amendments. So globally, amendments are governed by Article 1, Section 10. And the only thing that this adds is that provided that amendments wouldn't cause a conflict with general law, chapter 44B. I'd be hard pressed to think that if we did propose an amendment that was in violation of that general law, that it would get approved by the AG.
Yes, yeah,
so
this is right. This section is sort of redundant. In that, yes, it goes without saying that you won't be allowed to amend it in a way that comes in conflict with General Law, Chapter 44B. So
it doesn't seem to hurt anything to
Right.
leave it in, but it didn't seem
Yeah.
necessary either.
no, it doesn't hurt to leave it in, and arguably it's redundant and unnecessary.
Yeah, I suppose it's good to have a reference there to the section that governs it.
Yeah, I mean, the very first paragraph of Section 1,
Yeah.
references the enabling statute.
So that's an interesting question, whether, I know in some cases there's a question of which thing takes precedence if there's a conflict, because I know there's some things in MGL where it says like, unless the bylaw states otherwise. So I wonder if this actually states that the MGL 44B takes precedence in that case. Just trying to figure out why that might have had to be in there. It could just be that this was some sample, some general language.
And it probably
only
comes from a
adapted.
sample bylaw,
Yeah,
and it's not, sometimes people put things like this into the bylaws, even though it's really not necessary. Yeah. Arguably, you could say that it's sort of a belt and suspenders approach to remind us that if we're thinking about amending it, let's plan ahead and anticipate that the AG will reject it and not send something to the AG that's going to get rejected.
Yeah.
So, that's probably the value in having it there, is just sort of a reminder, superfluous though it may be. And I think with that, it's 7:39, and I want to get down to the Housing Trust meeting. So we'll stop here at Article 30. We're good with Article 44 as it is, or 34?
yes.
Okay, so, well, we made it quite a way through. And we'll pick up where we left off at our next meeting, and maybe we'll have some more, and we've got a couple more now that we'll have in front of us for review. So good.
So are we leaving the meeting open so that we can go downstairs as a, that's kind of what's on the agenda.
Yeah. So before we, we have our minutes of the previous meeting. Any motion with respect to that?
One point, I don't want to take a motion first, but your clerk's been asleep at the wheel. And I don't think I can share, but I believe the section the section on bylaw updates that I sent out kind of stops mid-sentence. I think I PDF'd it prematurely. So that section should end. Enforcement authorities to discuss any interest they may have in adopting non-criminal disposition as applicable.
I move to accept the Thursday, January 26th meeting minutes as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously. And with respect to the continuation, if any, how many of us are going to go on downstairs to the Affordable Housing Trust meeting? If it's not a quorum, we can adjourn the meeting now.
Yeah, so I don't think I would add any value above and beyond what you've already circulated. So it's
Okay.
similar.
All right, so if it's only Greg and I going downstairs, and we can declare this meeting adjourned, if someone would care to make the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, this meeting be adjourned. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Declare motion carried unanimously.